Perhaps an online onslaught, but by any definition, the president is once again using the virtual bully pulpit to take shots at perhaps his political enemies, or in this case, his fired former FBI director. He says this: Democrats can't find a smoking gun tying the Trump campaign to Russia after James Comey's testimony. No smoking gun, no collusion at Fox News. That's because there was, all caps, no collusion. So now the Dems go to a simple private transaction, wrongly calling it a campaign contribution, which it was not. But even if it was, it's only a civil case like Obama's, but it was done correctly by a lawyer, and there would not even be a fine. Lawyer's liability if he made a mistake, not me. Cohen, speaking of Michael Cohen, his former fixer, just trying to get his sentence reduced, all caps, witch hunt. Now, this comes after Comey's behind closed doors testimony before House lawmakers, about which the president criticized Comey's faulty memory.
There he goes again. I thought I was lying, James Comey. Now I'm leaking James Comey. We have to remind ourselves the President of the United States of America is publicly announcing that people are committing crimes, they should be in jail, private citizens. That's not okay.
Of course, it is also possible that Comey, Bill, could once again have to testify. You heard Senator Goodlatte mention that. Lindsey Graham and others have said as much as well, Bill.
The White House saying about the Washington Post story, suggesting Trump campaign officials were in contact with Russians during the transition, Kevin.
Listen, on the record, Bill, they're not saying a great deal. Off the record, they're sort of trying to poke holes in some of the reporting that you've seen out there, in particular in the Washington Post. I want to lay it out slowly for the people at home who haven't had a chance to sort of wash in it the way we have inside the Beltway. What they're suggesting is this idea that General Flynn interacted with officials representing Moscow is not on its face uncommon or even unlawful. The White House officials that I've talked to point to the fact that, among other topics, Flynn is said to have discussed getting the Kremlin to side with the U.S. on an issue involving Israel. However, the Post, citing Michael Cohen's testimony, said that he was also in contact with Russians about building a Trump property in Moscow. And again, their argument is, so what? That's not nefarious, nor is it illegal. But the question obviously becomes, Bill, was there a quid pro quo? And that is yet to be proven. Bill?
All right, one more question for you. What's the latest on a new White House chief of staff and that search, Kevin?
Yeah, a real surprise over the weekend. A lot of people felt like it would be Nick Ayers, the vice president's chief of staff. He is very, very highly regarded here in the nation's capital, and in particular here at the White House. Very strong reputation, but he didn't want to commit to working for the Trump White House through 2020, and so that leaves the outgoing chief of staff, John Kelly, in a bit of a holding pattern, waiting to get his replacement up to speed. That is, of course, depending on who he is or she is. But the general's departure bill is also raising questions about Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen. She is said to be very close to Kelly. His departure, it is thought, could signal hers as well. As for possible Kelly replacement, names we're most often hearing here at the White House: Mick Mulvaney, Mark Meadows, Matt Whitaker. A trio there, all qualified. We'll see what, if anything, the president decides to do in the day ahead. Bill?
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin Corke leading our coverage there from the North Lawn. Thank you, sir. Sandra.
For more on the transcript of Comey's interview before House lawmakers, let's go to Peter Doocy live from Washington. Peter, good morning.
Good morning, Sandra. Behind closed doors, Comey confirmed there was not evidence of campaign collusion when he left the FBI. He said this, quote, "That's the way we treated the Russian counterintelligence investigations. We opened them in late July, didn't know whether we had anything. In fact, when I was fired as director, I still didn't know whether there was anything to it." He also explained, quote, "The Trump campaign was not under investigation. The FBI in late July opened counterintelligence investigations of 4 Americans to see if they were working in any way with the Russians to influence our elections." And Comey called complaints about Mueller investigator Peter Strzok a conspiracy. He said this: "Peter Strzok helped draft my letter to Congress on October 28th that Hillary Clinton blames for her defeat. So it's hard for me to see how he was on Team Clinton secretly at that point in time." However, Republicans are upset that Comey answered dozens of questions by saying either he didn't know or he didn't remember.
It's pretty amazing that Jim Comey has memory lapse issues. Maybe he needs to get checked for that. I'm not sure. But, you know, because when he walks out in the hall and he finds reporters, it's all of a sudden becomes very loquacious. He gets to talk about everything. And to say that there was not a FISA abuse problem.
But Democrats walked away very satisfied that Comey's FBI never bent the rules to spy on Trump associates.
entire purpose of this investigation is to cast aspersion on the real investigation, which is Mueller. There is no evidence whatsoever of bias at the FBI or any of this other nonsense they're talking about.
Comey will be back testifying some more next week, but next year, Democrats are the ones with the subpoena power to call witnesses. Sandra?
Peter Doocy in Washington for us. Thank you.
We have a lot more to talk about. With us today, House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy in studio here in New York. And welcome back, sir. Good morning to you. One of the many things we discovered in the Comey testimony is that 4 were under surveillance, 4 Trump campaign officials,
yes,
as opposed to 2 before. What does that tell you, if anything? Does that change the story in any way?
I don't think it changed the story, but it goes to show the discrediting of Comey. Whereas he sits in this hearing, but he says, I don't know, 166 times as he goes through. He wrote a book, he goes through. One thing that came to me is there's no collusion with this president. And Comey, I don't know why he's still out there talking about things he's discredited.
Help us understand when he says 14 Russians had contact with Trump campaign officials in 2016. Is that an issue, or is that just how Washington works?
If you're in an international city, people interact with a lot of individuals. I don't know what he's referring to here, but did they affect the election or the outcome? Every investigation, the House and Senate says they did not. Did they talk with the president? No, that wasn't the case. So if you look at what Comey said in there, the FISA, going after individual, here they are. Comey knew that who paid for the dossier, and he still did not tell the courts. He thought there was nothing wrong with what they went through with FISA. I thought that was a major problem inside that investigation.
You just heard from Jerry Nadler. Here's Adam Schiff on CBS on Sunday.
My takeaway is there's a very real prospect that on the day Donald Trump leaves office, the Justice Department may indict him, that he may be the first president in quite some time to face the real prospect of jail time.
Listen. Schiff is the same individual who 2 years ago, before any investigation started, said he had proof and that he could never produce anything. His credibility is rather low inside Washington for his members on either side of the aisle. I think what it shows, if the president hires an attorney to solve a problem, he expects him to do it in a legal manner. I don't see, and if Schiff is taking this beyond to go forward and say there's a impeachable offense because of a campaign finance problem, there's a lot of members in Congress who would have to leave for that same place.
You leave the majority of the first week of January. What do you think this does to the state of Washington affairs when Democrats head up all these committees?
Well, it's a challenge. It looks like what they're going to focus on is just more investigations. I think America is too great of a nation to have such a small agenda. I think there's other problems out there that we really should be focused upon. And in my belief is, let's see where we can work together. Let's move America forward. We've investigated this for a long period of time. Both sides have come up with nothing in the process. I think we should put the American people first.
Let's see what calculation they make come January. In the meantime, you have about 2 more weeks when you are in charge. GOP funding priorities are what now, do you believe, of the next 2 weeks?
Well, we fund 75% of the government already. So we have 2 weeks left, 2 more weeks to go, 25% of the government still to be funded. One of those elements also deals with the security along the border. Nancy Pelosi's in a tough position. She has to get 218 votes on the floor of Congress individually, so she doesn't want to deal with the subject. Schumer, he's only got about 1.6 in there to deal with border security. We got a caravan coming forward. I think we can find common ground. I know where the president is. The president wants to come to an agreement, work a deal out, and that's what he's going to have a meeting with them this week. We've got Google's CEO coming in tomorrow. I think it's very important based upon what we're looking at bias, what we're looking at privacy issues, what we're looking at what they're doing in China and what they're doing with our U.S. military. I think there's a lot of questions.
That's very interesting. With regard to border security, you have technology down there, you have personnel to take care of the wall. Do you think it happens or not?
It has to happen in the process. We've been funding it. We've been building part of it already. It's a combination of the element to make sure the border is secure.
Yeah. What is your sense of the tariff battle?
Well, I think we're getting China's attention. Someone should have done this a long time ago. I believe the next 90 days, the president thinks he can get an agreement. I think America will be stronger for that. What China's been doing to a number of companies in America, from stealing their technology, from ever since they entered the WTO, they have not played by the same rules. I think the rest of the world is looking at the same time. We just renegotiated NAFTA. I think that modernizes, makes America stronger in the same basis.
On that point, do you think that'll pass?
I do believe it will pass.
I guess we'll call it USMCA?
Yes, I believe we won't see it until February. It'll be with a new Congress, but I believe at the end of the day it does pass.
As you look back on your time when you had all three branches of government in control, you got a lot done. What's your biggest regret that did not happen?
I wish we would have been able to reform health care. That element would have made, one, costs lower, would have protected more individuals. And remember, even though you have three branches of government, as long as there's 60 votes in the Senate, you never totally have it.
Let's see how it goes over the next 2 weeks. Kevin McCarthy, great to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here in person.
Thank you.
Sandra.
All right, great to have him on set here. We are going to have much more on all of this coming up when House Majority Whip Steve Scalise will join us live in our studio. That's going to be coming up just a bit later this hour. And of course, we will want to ask him about that transcript of the closed-door session with James Comey and lawmakers from the House, but also want to ask him about the president's demand for $5 billion for the border wall, what will happen next, how much common ground can be found between the two parties when it comes to that. Of course, we know Nancy Pelosi has made her views on that clear and her willingness to negotiate over DACA or lack thereof, I should probably say.
On and on it goes. Yeah, nice to see Kevin McCarthy.
Yes.
We'll see what happens in January, as we mentioned. In the meantime, breaking news. One person's dead. A powerful snowstorm slamming the southeast, and man, did it come down. Thousands of flights have been grounded. A foot of snow in some areas. Many waking up today without power, so we're live on the ground to let you know how they're digging out today, Sandra.
Plus, Prime Minister Theresa May will address Parliament at any moment now over that crucial vote on Brexit. So what is about to happen there?
Also, there are tens of thousands in the streets across France for a fourth weekend in a row protesting the French government and their policies. Is the populist movement spreading worldwide? And if so, what do leaders need to pay attention to? Coming up next.
Hello, Mom.
Amanda's mom's appointment just...
Well, I think what these indictments and filings show is that the president was at the center of a massive fraud, several massive frauds against the American people. And it's now our job, the job of the Justice Department, the special counsel, and the Congress to get to the bottom of this, to find out basically what did the president know and when did he know it, so that we can then hold him accountable.
So that is the next likely head of the House Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, out of New York, weighing in on the court filings Bob Mueller released last week in the case of former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen, implicating the president in hush money payments during the 2016 campaign. Now the president, his legal team pushing back. Byron York, chief political correspondent, Washington Examiner, has gone through all the legal documents, Byron, of which there are many. Good morning to you, and how you doing there, sir? Well, what do you think is the biggest news? Why don't we take it a piece step by step here? The biggest news is what, Byron?
Well, the biggest news was the statement in the filings from the Justice Department prosecutors in the Southern District of New York that in the final weeks of the 2016 campaign, Donald Trump directed his lawyer, Michael Cohen, to pay off Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal to keep them from talking about their sexual encounters with President Trump. The argument is that since this was done in the final weeks of the campaign in a campaign context, this constituted a campaign finance violation. And what that did was it instantly shifted the conversation about President Trump from talk about alleged collusion in the 2016 election, that is cooperation with Russia to try to fix the election, shifted it from that to allegations of a campaign finance violation by the president.
Okay. Rudy Giuliani, Sunday morning, here was the tweet he sent out in reaction to a lot of this, Byron. No collusion, no obstruction, now campaign finance, but payments to settle lawsuits are not clearly a proper campaign contribution or expenditure. No responsible lawyer would charge a debatable campaign finance violation as a crime. Well, maybe those suffering from TDD, which was not defined, but I assume that is Trump derangement disorder. What do you think about the point Giuliani makes? No responsible lawyer would charge a debatable campaign finance violation as a crime.
Well, it is an iffy case. This is not open and shut. In 2010, the Justice Department indicted John Edwards, who had run for president, and made a similar allegation to them that he had against him that he had actually gotten contributions to pay off an extramarital affair that he had in which he had a child. And it was a stretch of the campaign finance laws to say that against Edwards at the time. And indeed, the jury acquitted Edwards on one count and then deadlocked in Edwards' favor mostly on the rest of the counts. So it was not a success at all. So I think that you might make the argument that we're outside of this political context right now, this is not a case based on the Edwards precedent that the Justice Department would try to prosecute.
So here was the tweet from the president, one of a few earlier today, all right? He says, which it was not. But even if it was only a civil case like Obama's, but it was done correctly by a lawyer, and there would not even be a fine. Lawyer's liability if he made a mistake, not me. Cohen just trying to get a sentence reduced. Witch hunt. He concludes that tweet that way. In the meantime, there was a filing against Paul Manafort suggesting he had contact with some officials at the White House. How much can we figure out on that one, Byron?
Hard to figure much out on that one. It said he had contacts in 2018, early this year, with people at the White House. We don't know who they are. We don't know what the contact was about. We do know that the Mueller office is pretty mad at Paul Manafort, and they accused him of continuing to lie about his business dealings in Ukraine. And remember, that was the heart of the tax evasion and fraud case against Manafort, in which Manafort was convicted on several counts. So this is something that a continuing fight between Manafort and the special counsel's office, but not necessarily about any allegations of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia in 2016.
There's a lot to digest. We appreciate you doing it for us, okay? Thank you, Byron. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Bill.
You bet. Sandra.
Meanwhile, fired FBI Director James Comey said he either did not know, did not remember, or could not recall answers to questions from House Republicans more than 200 times on Friday to his car. Some areas there seeing as much as 14 inches of snow, almost 150,000 without power this morning. 500 plus car accidents reported, and more than 100 flights in and out of North Carolina had to be canceled over the weekend. Brian Yennis is live in Asheville with the latest there. Brian, how is this looking out there this morning?
Good morning, Sandra. Well, the snow actually just stopped here in Asheville, North Carolina, a little less than an hour ago. You know, this storm was harder and it came earlier here in the south than we've usually seen down here. You can see the snow accumulation here on the top of the cars, about a foot of snow here in Asheville, North Carolina. And if you look over here, they've done a pretty good job, a really good job here of plowing the streets. They've also shoveled the sidewalks. But the concern this morning from the governor and elsewhere here in the south, from Virginia and here in North Carolina, South Carolina and Georgia, is now icing. This is the puddles that is left over after the storm, and now there's a concern that it will freeze overnight. We have sub-freezing temperatures expected here tonight. Now, the National Weather Service says that there continues to be a winter storm warning here in North Carolina. We have over 509 collisions here in North Carolina in the first 12 hours of this storm. You know, the National Weather Service says there was more snow here in the Carolinas than there was in Fairbanks, Alaska yesterday. There was only an inch there. Over a foot of snow all over the western regions of the Carolinas here, as well as in southwestern Virginia. The winter storm advisory is still in effect there until 2 p.m. We've got parts of Virginia with over a foot and a half of snow, 120 collisions and traffic accidents in that state. And, you know, the National Guard here in North Carolina, they've been stepping up. About 170 National Guard troops have been out. They've been helping people push their cars out of the wet, heavy snow. They've also been doing welfare checks, helping out the elderly who are stuck in their homes. And, you know, there is no power for hundreds of thousands of people. 164,000 people in North Carolina without power at this hour. South Carolina, about 57,000. And here, and also in Virginia, 64,000 people without power. Unfortunately, there have been deaths, Sandra. In Matthews, North Carolina, a man died after a tree fell on his moving vehicle. That car went into the front of a church and also then hit into a tree. He died, and the other passenger in the vehicle was injured, but thankfully did not die. 3 others, Sandra, by the way, in South Carolina over the weekend died of carbon monoxide poisoning. Just a reminder that in these storms, especially after with no power, you got to keep those generators outside. Sandra?
Deadly storm it was. Brian Yanis, thank you.
Markets opening a matter of moments now. U.S.-China trade fears led to sharp declines last week. How will that go today? We'll find out in about 2 minutes from now. Sandra?
Plus, this image of an 8-month-old boy being pushed under a hole in the U.S.-Mexico border wall, showing the desperation of thousands of migrants waiting for asylum. We're going to be live from Tijuana in just a moment. Plus, there's this.
If I'm President Trump Tuesday, I would tell Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, if I were the president, I would dig in and not give in on additional wall funding. I'd want the whole $5 billion because the caravan is a game changer. 1.6 is available to the president. He wants 5. And after the caravan, if you don't see the need for additional border security, you're just not paying much attention. So Mr. President, dig in, do not give in when it comes to the wall.
Got it. Lindsey Graham, there is some advice for President Trump. The president meeting tomorrow with Democratic leaders over funding for the wall with Mexico, a government shutdown deadline about 2 weeks away. Louisiana Congressman Steve Scalise addresses all that in a matter of moments. First, though, on the southern border, these images showing the desperation of migrants. An 8-month-old boy being shown trying to be pushed through the wall. Steve Harrigan is live in Tijuana, Mexico, with more from there today. Steve, good morning.
Bill, these pictures are touching people's hearts, and there's been a tremendous amount of effort on both sides of the border to try and ease some of that desperation. A flood of donations has come from across the border in San Diego. Food, tents, trying to help the people here in the shelters, but organizers say there is still a great need for more assistance.
There's a big need for underwear because there are no washing machines here, so we were giving away underwear and socks. And then today we are focusing on the infants and the women that are pregnant at the camp.
Conditions at the camp are still tough, but they are getting a little bit better. They've issued ID cards, and they're really trying to keep order. Unrest near the border doesn't serve either country's interest. It's a real economic hit to both sides. As far as the numbers of the migrants go, they keep dropping steadily, down from 6,000 to about 2,000. And while some of the Central Americans have gone home, some have crossed illegally, a lot are staying right here in Tijuana. They are finding jobs in the giant factories here, those jobs that pay about $10 a day. Bill, back to you.
Steve Harrigan live there from Tijuana. Thank you, sir. 34 past, Sandra.
All right, so now for more on the border wall and the funding battle happening there, let's bring in House Majority Whip and Louisiana Republican Congressman Steve Scalise. Congressman, it's always great to have you.
Morning, Sandra. Good to be with you.
Especially on set this morning, since this is such a huge week and the countdown is on to fund the government by the end of the year. Where does this battle go next? The president's making it very clear the number's $5 billion. Democrats do not look like they are willing to go anywhere near there. They are rejecting that. What happens?
Well, what we have is a difference of understanding about what's happening at the border. You know, the president has been very clear from when he ran for office that he wants to protect America's border and keep this country safe. And now more than ever, when you see the caravan, I know what Lindsey Graham was talking about, you've got thousands of people literally saying we're just going to storm your border and come into the country. And, oh, by the way, we have at least 600 known convicted criminals as part of this caravan. These aren't people seeking asylum, by the way, Sandra. They were offered asylum and jobs in Mexico and turned it down. So let's not talk about asylum. It's whether or not we're going to have rule of law in the country. And by the way, we let 1 million people a year into our country legally. There's a legal process. There are thousands of people waiting to come to this country the right way. Follow the rules. And the president said if you want to seek asylum, there's a way to do it. That's not what this is about. The border funding is going to be the big battle in these next 11 days. And the president's negotiating with the Senate right now, House and Senate, Republican and Democrat. The president's laid out very clearly. He wants $5 billion. And it's not just to build the wall. Clearly, that's a big part of it. But it's for all the other technology and supporting things that our Border Patrol agents need. They're attacking, by the way, our Border Patrol agents, some of these people in this caravan, literally attacking Border Patrol agents. We ought to give them the tools to be safe as they protect our border.
How far do you want the president to go here? You just saw Lindsey Graham saying, you know, dig in, don't give in. He says put DACA on the table, put that on the negotiating table. Nancy Pelosi has already addressed that concept by saying this.
Would you be willing to support some degree of wall funding if you got a permanent, bona fide solution on DACA?
No.
Why not?
Well, because they're two different subjects. Most of us, speaking for myself, consider the wall immoral, ineffective, inexpensive, and the president said he promised it. He also promised Mexico would pay for it.
That was a firm no. So what's it going to take?
Well, you know, first of all, to say that it's immoral to protect this country, I mean, I don't know where, obviously, where Nancy Pelosi is right now is with the open borders crowd, the people that don't want any borders, that don't want ICE agents. She's been for abolishing ICE. And so I think what's happening is right now the Democrats in the House are being held hostage by the extreme radicals on the left. This isn't mainstream. By the way, most of this country, wherever they are in DACA, believes that we ought to secure the border. You know, let's deal with immigration. The president, by the way, was willing to put a lot of things on the table to negotiate with Democrats in exchange for wall funding. And they walked away and they said they don't want to do anything because the extreme left doesn't want to do anything because they want open borders. That's the dilemma where Nancy Pelosi is right now.
Well, the first big test of the new Congress and the president is going to happen tomorrow. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, they're going to be meeting with President Trump at the White House. What do you think is going to come from that new dynamic?
Well, there's a lot of things that the president's been willing to negotiate on in exchange for getting the wall funding and in dealing with the DACA problem. We've had bills on the House floor to address the DACA problem, and every single Democrat's voted no on all of those measures. And oh, by the way, when Nancy Pelosi had a supermajority when Barack Obama was president, she never tried to deal with this problem. So, you know, they don't want to agree to any solution because they want open borders on the far left. The problem they're going to have is this country doesn't want to shut down over whether or not to secure the border. They want a secure border. The president wants to secure the border, and he got elected president on that platform. Are they going to say they want to shut the government down because they don't want to secure America's border?
If the president has threatened to do just that, shut down the government, if he doesn't get what he wants here, would you support the president if he was pushed into that corner? Well,
I support the president's position that we need to fund true border security, including the wall. You know, in the numbers, $5 billion. If there's a better way to get there than what the president's laid out, then they need to come with an alternative. They can't just come and say they want to shut the government down for no reason because they don't want border security. They'll lose that argument with the American people.